Welcome to the Mental Health Mukbang, where we deliver bite-sized mental health to make it easily digestible for you. And we're your hosts. My name is Jed. I'm a therapist based out of LA.
I'm Jeanie. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist based out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
I'm Jeanie, and I'm a clinical psychologist based out of Houston, Texas.
And I'm Chris. I'm an MFT based in Houston, Texas.
So our purpose here is to bring people together to talk about mental health. And since we're Asian, the best way to do that is through food. So this is the Mental Health Mukbang, and we hope that for everybody who's joining us, that you'll be able to kind of join us too. And whether you're eating or not, just to be able to join us in this conversation that we're having about mental health. And so today is actually our first episode, and our pilot episode, I guess. What would be more appropriate than to talk about why we feel like Asian mental health is important and what we feel like some of the greatest challenges are. So the whole idea of this mukbang is just for us to be able to kind of like really talk casually about Asian mental health issues, so that we can really take the stigma away from how we feel as Asians about mental health issues, and maybe even at the core of it, just our emotions in general. So that's how these videocasts are going to work. We'll be eating and munching, and we hope that everybody was going to enjoy just joining us for the chat that we have. Even if we are professionals, we are people too, and we have opinions, and we have, I guess we talk about mental health issues outside of the therapy room. And so just a quick disclaimer though, even though we're all professionals, this is not like professional advice. This is not therapy. So if you do need assistance, we'll have resources down below or in the sidebar, wherever it is, for you. And so we hope that there's no confusion there, because, this is what we do as professionals. All right. So why don't we just kind of get into it, What issue about Asian mental health matters to you the most, or just why Asian mental health matters to you in general? And, well, we're just kind of free-forming it here, so
I'll start.
All right.
Because I finished my food for now.
Nice.
Well, I want to say, obviously, we cannot deny the way, I'll talk for myself, our upbringing, how our upbringing plays into our mental health. And mainly, I am hoping to address our cultural stigma in relationship to mental health. I recall growing up, never being able to talk about. Now, I grew up in a loving home. I'll point that out. But when you're growing up in such a stressful environment where it's all about making sure I'm the best child and getting those straight A's, and yes, I did grow up in that type of home, I felt like I couldn't even share even remotely my interests or how I was feeling. And now my kids come home and they say things like, I'm stressed out. That to me is what I want to promote more. However, there's a lot of kids, adults out there that relate to my upbringing, and they struggle now with even talking about their emotions, right? So I would just love to delve through that. And that's like 55 episodes worth, right? Our history and just the way we all grew up.
Are you saying you already have content for the next year?
I could talk about, tiger parenting forever. Okay. I'm living it too, right? Jenny knows. Jenny's kids are younger, but I am constantly trying to balance, right? I did not like that about my upbringing, but somehow it's infiltrated my blood because that's how I grew up. So sometimes I go, why did you get that B+? I mean, yes, okay, I have admitted to saying that, but it's very different because now I'm all about, are you stressed? If you're too stressed, it's okay, let me know. Do you not want to do this piano recital? It's very different. They have choices too, and they're able to speak freely about their emotions. But still, I want to admit that I do struggle because I grew up like that, right?
Yeah. Jeanie, can you tell us kind of what your cultural heritage is? And I think it'd be helpful for everyone to share that as well.
Thank you. Well, I'll start. Korean American, second generation is how I identify. So my parents came to the U.S. in 1974 when I was a baby. So pretty much I grew up in the States. But yes, that constant struggle of them being like, you're Korean, and also me refusing to speak Korean growing up. I regret that. I'm going to let that out. I do regret that. How about you, Jenny?
So I was supposed to become an accountant, honestly.
Really?
And so I hated it. The grades were fine. I was on my way to become a CPA, and every single step of the way, I was like, what am I doing? I can't do this for the next 60 years of my life. And so psychology came at a time when I was searching for something else, but no one could tell me what this was. I didn't know any psychologists. And on top of that, I didn't even know any psychologists of color. And I went to a huge public university. And so every single professor was predominantly white and often male. And so I think I have that kind of part of my personality where when you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it. And so I had a male professor say to me, well, you come from a non-traditional background. You're a business student. How are you going to get a PhD? You should apply for a master's and then get your PhD. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all the way. So luckily I got into grad school and, realized that there were so few people who reflected our voices as Asian Americans, my voice as an Asian American, in this field. And I really felt that was a critical piece as to why we're all even here today. That the first time I saw an Asian American professor who taught neuropsychology, it was mind-blowing. She was this spunky, Cantonese woman who was brilliant in terms of testing and the mind. And I could see myself in her for the first time in my career. And that's why I think mental health matters, especially for Asians, because there's something really powerful about being able to identify with somebody and say, wow, what they're saying and the information they provide, they get me. They know what is going on. So I am first generation, second generation, I don't even know how to say it. I came to the United States from Taiwan when I was 2. So I don't know what that makes me. 1.5 generation.
I think that technically means that, functionally, you're first generation, right?
Right.
You immigrated here. But,
yeah.
Totally.
Technically, right, you would be a first generation because you immigrated here, but functionally, you're pretty much like monocultural at that point, right? Or monocultural in the sense that you're Asian American, right? Versus you grew up in Taiwan, was it? Right? Like,
it was in Taiwan.
Yeah, so like, it's not like you grew up in Taiwan and you had like an understanding of it and then you came here. It was you already.
Right.
That's why I call her second, but that's another thing. We can talk about the technicality. Some of us don't even know what to call each other.
Yeah, because
1.5.
I don't know, because like for me, I was born here, right? But I feel very much, I because I grew up around all Asians and my first languages were Asian languages. I definitely don't feel as like bicultural as some of my friends who moved here when they were older. But I definitely feel more connected than I would say some of my other friends who were born here. So I'm Chinese, Hong Kong, technically I am because I have Hong Kong residency, so I could say that, I think. So let's just hope that the internet doesn't get mad at me, but yeah, my parents are from Hong Kong and Macau, so I very much do not really identify as like Chinese just because, like there's like a cultural difference there. Even though politically you can say that they're like the same, I feel culturally very different. And so, that's just how I feel about it. But yeah, I
there, by the way.
What's that?
That's an episode right there.
That is an episode right there. Like
right?
Geopolitics and our identity, like and how mental health is incorporated in all of that, I think that's totally.
That's like 6 episodes.
I'm always showing that for another episode. But yeah, that's so my background. I was raised in the San Gabriel Valley around like all Asians, so I feel very much represented. All of my friends were Asian growing up. I went to a public university where the demographics were like 60% Asian. So so yeah, I never really felt out of place. But I did do a lot of interaction with families because I come from like a church background, and I was always really involved in the community. So the people that I interact with, I can always see where their struggles are when the cultural differences hit, where there was like a mental and emotional divide between what some of my friends were experiencing and some of what I was experiencing. Because my parents came over to do grad school, and they went into the South. So they became acculturated very quickly because they had like nobody. But for them, they really adapted. I think my parents adapted well. And I guess I could thank my grandparents for raising like very adaptable children, because they were able to pick up the language, they were able to go to school here, but they were also able to maintain a lot of their Asian identity. They both speak Mandarin and Cantonese, and so I think that for me growing up, just being in that environment where even though I was surrounded by Mandarin and Cantonese speakers growing up, and so you just kind of pick it up and you kind of understand like the nuances between the generations, because all my friends are those folks' kids, right? And I can see in their families that there's a little bit of difficulty in adjustment, and sometimes like you don't get to talk about how you're feeling, and very much the tiger parent experience, right? It's just you do good and that's it. That's it. As long as you do good, like we don't care about anything else. And I think that just hearing a lot of their struggles kind of growing up is kind of what directed me to the field. I was like, we should talk about these things. We need to address these issues. And as a community, I think I've seen a lot of people kind of turn their backs on their Asian identity just because they don't want to be a part of it anymore. And so for me, I'm like, why can't we bridge those gaps? Why can't we understand each other? And why can't we start to kind of heal those differences so that we can be healthier? And I think, I don't know, I guess for me, I look to my parents as like that kind of like role model for me, or like that inspiration to kind of bridge that gap in the relationship that I had with them. So I don't know, I come from a very different place than a lot of the people in our group. Our group being Subtle Asian Mental Health. And so sometimes it's hard for me to kind of relate, but I have heard their stories before, and my friends are those people. So it is very kind of personal to me because it did affect a lot of the people that I knew growing up. And when I was a kid, I was really confused. I was like, hey, like, I don't understand that because my parents were so open. I just didn't understand. I was like, you can't just like tell them? And so as kind of time progressed and as I became a therapist and I started working with these families, I realized, like, there's so much going on here, and there's so much that we could move forward together with. And we don't have to be American or Asian. We can be Asian and American. And I think that's...
I was going to say, Jed, I love your angle, because why not give people hope that they also can have that experience? I'm hoping that my kids have your experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we need to hear from Chris.
Yep.
All right, I started rambling. That happens.
Yeah, I was like, stop. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, it's all over the place, right? I went into mental health because of the lack of emotion growing up. I didn't even see my parents a lot up until like, I don't even know, probably like 5th grade. They were always working, right? They worked hard to provide for me. Dealing with race a lot of times, I had death anxiety. I started to get death anxiety at the age of 4. So I struggled with that for a very long time. And, not knowing, I think what hurt the most is knowing that my parents have this wide variety of emotions and experience, and I will never know that. I will never really learn who they are. right? As much as I love them, as much as I care about them, as much time as I spend with them, they don't even know how to really fully express themselves. And that makes me sad, especially as I watch them get older. But I remember wanting to go into mental health ever since I was a teen. And, teen angst, that's definitely where a lot of issues started to arise between myself and my parents with independence and things like that. And I remember going to a therapist with my family when I was like 17. And the first thing she said was, well, when you're 18, you can just move out anyway and everything will be, peachy keen, right? And I was like, that's not how that works in our community, right? Everything that you're saying right now is the absolute worst thing that you could be saying. And that frustrated me. So I always pursued psychology, kind of, I'll be honest, and I screwed around a bit. It took a while to get to where I wanted to be. But even up until I was like 30 and graduating from my master's, my parents and my uncles were still giving me pamphlets of like optometry school and dentistry and being like, it's not too late. You can still be a doctor or at least a nurse. Like, you can still do this if you really want to. But I think they finally kind of understand that this is what I'm happy and passionate about. But long story short, I want to give people the childhood and the experience that I feel like I missed out on.
Thanks for sharing that. I sensed emotion in you. I was like,
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, because we all have our different reasons of. I love what Jenny shared too about not seeing the representation. Mm-hmm. One of my other passions is, and I think we all touched on it, some of the college I work a lot with college kids, or they sought me out somehow, and they exactly what Chris just shared. Some of them are like Jeanie. So I went in depressed and anxious or whatever they were struggling with, and I came out worse because, again, I'm not trying to insult the clinical staff, but they didn't understand.
Right.
They were not culturally, and I don't even like this word, culturally competent. So I tend to use the word culturally competent. That's just me. They just they don't even have that. And have you seen the cultural competence training today? It's the same. Mm-hmm. Meaning, we're like in 2020, and I remember looking at some recent books of the psychology student, this friend of mine whose daughter's a psychology student. I'm like, what? Still, it's the same? You're still using the same stuff from like 15 years ago? I'm just saying, the trend, it's different. We need to change that.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. And I kind of agree with you on that. If cultural competence to me sounds like such a cop-out, sounds like such a complicated word to describe empathy. That's all it is. Like, just listen to the person in front of you and really connect with what it is that they're talking about. Everyone's experience is going to be different. So why does their culture add this huge divide, right?
Or go even deeper and say, I've actually even said, if you don't know, why can't you ask? There is a way to ask instead of going. And actually now my friends ask me so much. They're like, so was that person Chinese? And I'll actually be like, I don't know. I don't know if she was Chinese. I'll ask her. They're like, oh, I thought you could tell. I go, no, just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I can tell. Yeah. But still, these are my friends who have gotten comfortable to ask me. Mm-hmm. And so I'll tell other providers, clinical providers and medical providers I also work with, please ask your patient, what's wrong with them? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with that? Meaning, you're the expert medically, but why can't you say, so I'm sorry, tell me a little bit more what you meant by that with your family. What's wrong with asking? And the doctors are like, oh yeah, we could do that. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
That's better. That's weird though, because when I was in grad school, which was maybe like 4 years ago now, our training on cultural competency was a little bit different. Or I don't know what it was before, but nowadays, when I was in school, they were kind of pushing the idea of like, never assume anything about somebody's culture. Just because like you might think one thing or another about their culture, even if you know what it is, like you can't assume anything because people's experiences are so different. And I don't know, like for me, I went to like a school that I thought was like relatively like conservative. So that to me, I was like, that makes so much sense though. I think at a certain point you realize that cultural competency is just the ability to connect with somebody and ask the questions about them, to get to know them and understand their experience, because like there are some like general things about like cultures that you can kind of understand, but not every family is going to be the same, and not every experience is going to be the same. Because even for us, like, we say we want to do a mental health mukbang because food brings us together, and I mean that's a very general thing, but for some families that's not true. Like for some Asian families that's not true. This is like our moment of like meta-analysis of ourselves. But yeah, but for the...
Can you explain the mukbang, by the way?
Do we explain it? Yeah, we explained it a little bit, right? We're eating and chatting, right? So even though sometimes it's a little harder because we chat a lot to eat, but you know, that's the idea. But yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna wrap up that idea. So.
Oh, go ahead. No, finish.
Oh yeah, but nowadays, like when we think about cultural competency, right? Why can't we just call it like actually caring about our clients and just getting to know them?
Like labeling it separately, what Chris says. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I mean, if you just have basic levels of like human understanding, and okay, maybe not basic, but basic clinical levels of human understanding and empathy, I think that that goes a long way. And yeah, maybe it would be better if it wasn't just clinical. Like if we all had it, then we would just not make assumptions about other people, and we'd be able to better understand each other, as opposed to just, oh, like they're Asian, so they eat rice.
Yeah.
I went to a conference and I had dinner. It was like one of those dinners with the head of the ethics committee, and it was really cool because one, she said like at the end of the day, just worry about doing good. Don't worry too much about the other stuff. Just do good in your profession because that's why you should have signed up to do this in the first place, right? But the second thing that really struck me and that I took with me was that she said in terms of like cultural competence, and when clinicians often refer out because they feel like they can't connect with that person, you have to really think about it. Are you doing it to protect the client, or are you doing it to protect yourself? And the vast majority of the time it's to protect yourself because you don't want to learn more about this person, right? I don't want to name any names, but I remember working with a clinician, and after seeing all of the people that they referred out, my thought was, who do you even see? Right? Because it was, I don't see married couples, I don't see homosexuals, I don't see people dealing with this, I don't, see people doing this. So, and I was just like, so you only deal with the perfect client, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. And I just felt like it was more because they just didn't want to learn more about their clients, right?
Yeah, we're more comfortable. He or she was more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, they want to stay comfortable, which I don't feel like we should ever do in our job. In my personal viewpoint has always been, if I feel like I'm starting to get comfortable and feel like I know exactly what's going to happen all the time, then I am no longer listening to the person in front of me.
That's a really good point.
But I feel like it's, as clinicians, we have to go a step beyond. Though I believe empathy is the foundation and connection is the foundation, we have to check our biases because often they're implicit.
Yeah.
Right? If we could do it perfectly by just being empathetic, I think that, right, there wouldn't be all of these conflicts within therapy where a therapist doesn't get it. It's that they have these biases that they don't even have awareness about. And so the assumptions, that makes it seem like it's a conscious thing.
Absolutely.
But so much of what we think and how we think and when we engage is not dictated by the conscious. It's the implicit, and that seeps out in our conversations and dialogue with clients. So I feel like as clinicians of color, especially, we have to take to this as saying it's not just competence, it's not just empathy, it's we need to do our own internal work to say, what are the biases? I mean, my husband and I joke all the time, like often Asian parents tend to be the most racist. And I hope I can say that.
Yeah.
But, right, so that seeps into then how we internalize and understand the world too. And if I'm not checking that, and if I'm not constantly revising and asking and wondering, then I may implicitly walk into the room with a client with those biases.
Yeah, you're so right. You're right. I love that word, first of all, implicit bias. We do have that. And I'm glad you said it. Asian parents could be racist because, and even, and I want to point something else. We all are Asian. However, even within our own, within my Korean American circle, Chinese American circle, Hong Kong, we have our own biases against each other. Do you know what I'm talking about? You size somebody up, actually call it the Asian look when you meet somebody and they look you up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to say it. And immediately I'm like, okay, there's the wall. So even as a clinician, I, outside of my work, try to, by the way, have you ever gotten an implicit bias or unconsciously by somebody already when you say you're in mental health?
Mm-hmm.
Like from a fellow Asian, they're like, oh, you know.
There's
like,
a way to get around that, actually.
I know, but I'm like, yeah, bring it. You want to talk about it? But they're like, oh, I see. Yeah, so you're in mental health. So, I mean, I get that sometimes, and I'm like, I'm going to fight that. I'm going to break that wall down, even with my fellow Asian, whatever. Fellow mellow yellow. No. That's also something that I also, even in our I don't want people to assume just because we're all Asian American, we all have that same playing field. Not at all, right? So
I think you see that a lot in nowadays in like minority groups where just because we're a little bit more removed and we should understand a little bit more about our biases, there's a hubris about it that, oh, because I'm this, I automatically know so much about these different things. I agree. I have this conversation with Jed a lot of just constantly trying to dig through my biases, right? And admitting that I'm still a human being and that I'm still problematic, but I'm trying to work on it, right? At all points and aspects of my life. But I see people a lot of times who just go, no, I'm this, so you can't tell me anything about X or Y or these other situations, right? And it's exhausting, especially because, like you said, especially in this field, it's incredibly important to be working through your biases constantly.
So even us talking about this, I hope, because we're all clinicians, that I hope that we can hold each other accountable. I'm just hearing Chris kind of gave me goosebumps, and I related to the emotion in his voice, that I hope that we are also encouraging one another to continue to change and get better. We have to, it takes work. When you work with clients, I'm like, you guys, practicing mindfulness takes work, right? Yeah. So we got to tell ourselves that too. It takes work for us to be better clinicians or do our jobs for our clients. Mm-hmm. Not easy.
And I feel like if we talk about, right, honoring another person's heritage, their culture, who they are, we are, as mental health folks, and I feel like I'm just starting to like touch the tip of the iceberg of this. I almost feel like how could we not be somewhat involved in social justice then? Mm-hmm. And that I think is a whole nother episode on its own. But right, like if we are advocates for people really living authentically and being in an environment in which they can live authentically, then if we see systemic issues, can we sit by and let that happen and let colleagues blindly believe we're all the same, we are colorblind, we're all fine, right? Like I almost feel like there's an advocacy piece then to what we do. And that I think is really hard, especially for me as an Asian American female. I feel like I've been socialized to not have that fight in me. Just keep it, don't rock the boat, keep it contained. And I think that's a piece that also is part of the development of a mental health professional of color. Or not. You can be an ally too.
Yeah, I like you sharing that. I struggle with that piece too. We're also supposed to be the non-anxious presence, in the therapy room, outside the therapy room. So sometimes I'm like, how actively should I get involved without seeming, because I can get fired up, right? If something is not appropriately said. I'm always speaking from the side of a parent. It's so funny. Sometimes I'm like, who said that to you? And I'll try to go, what does she mean by that? And then my son's like, I don't know, calm down. But I'm thinking, this is actually during the coronavirus, right? So during things like, oh, you were sick because you had the coronavirus. They're joking. And he's saying this jokingly, but as that protective mom to me going, only based because of how I was raised, it would have been much more different. 20 years ago, it would have been more of an attack. These days, I'm thinking because we're a little bit more diverse from where I'm living now, I think it was meant to be in good humor. But it's so funny how my guards went up immediately. I'm like, who said that to you? And and they're like, they go, say it all the time. They say it to everybody. It's not a big deal. I mean, and he was sick. My son was sick, but this was before that. He was sick with the flu. But they're like, ooh, that's what you have, right? But anyways, that's another part of me also dealing with my own bringing up the upbringing and making sure, because as clinicians, we bring that into our room too, right? Into the therapy room, our values, our personal core beliefs, right? All that plays in. Also, that has to do with our biases too and how we grew up, right? Mm-hmm. So we're trying to share that we're trying to work on ourselves. I'm saying this to everybody. Yeah. It's hard work.
Yeah. That's unfortunate because even those small, like, even if it's said in jest, those microaggressions become a part of your identity, especially when you're at such a young formative age, right? You hear something enough times, you start to believe that it's true. And, you know, especially if it's your kid, that sucks, you know? I remember right when COVID started, I was out at a bar drinking and somebody introduced me to someone else. I went to shake their hand and they pulled their hand back and did the Corona thing. And I coughed on them because, hey, I thought that was funny too. We want to play that game. I kind of regretted it afterwards, but I was like, you'll be fine.
Well, you know, Jenny touched on something difficult. In our culture, we're known to be, you know, that's there we go, stereotypical. Let's not forget whole model minority thing. So we're supposed to be silent or not ruffle feathers. So that's where Jenny talked about that struggle. So even Chris going, maybe I should have done that. Well, technically you were defending yourself or having your response. So if my client, I'd be like, hey, if that made you feel better. I'd be like, oh, you know, be a little bit, don't start a fight or anything like that. I'm laughing because sometimes it's like, well, we also need to respond to those microaggressions. Mm-hmm. For sure. So anyways, can we wrap up the first episode?
Yeah.
We went all over the place this episode.
We talked about a lot of stuff, so at least people have a glimpse of what we'll talk about.
Yeah, I agree. We can always narrow it down into specific topics, but just to give people an idea of the wide variety of topics we will cover right now, I think is a good baseline.
Yeah, I think so.
I had fun.
Yeah. I had fun too.
Oh.
Fun too.
Yeah. I mean, I was coming from watching Jed eat with the chopsticks.
I will probably choose food that doesn't get stuck in my teeth as easily next time.
I'm bringing ramen noodles next time.
Yeah.
All right. No, this is a chopstick. Okay, so yeah. All right, chips and chopsticks. If you haven't thought about it, now's the time. Because that hot Cheeto powder, I know that's so. Oh, I see the shrimp crackers.
So I'm gonna have to get the chopsticks in, but this was an awesome first episode.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for joining us. We hope to bring you more of these mental health mukbangs. Maybe we should incorporate more of the food aspect. Otherwise, we're just like misleading people, and I think that's unethical.
No, we were still eating, and this was our pilot episode. So we just bear with us, but join us next time for our mental health mukbang.
Yeah, so we're gonna try to do these once a week, right? So
the Asian hearts.
So yeah, we try to put these out once a week, and we hope that we'll be able to kind of do it more regularly in the future. But for now, I guess that's us signing off. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next week.